Timothy J. Schwab of the God Culture claims that an ancient Ilocano epic poem, The Life of Lam-Ang, is a prophecy about the Philippines. In this epic the Philippines dies and an old man named Marcos brings him back to life. According to Tim, that story is most certainly a prophecy about the most corrupt political dynasty in the nation, the Marcoses. Before Tim even begins to break down the prophetic significance of the life of Lam-Ang, he gives this disclaimer.
Sure, we can't prove it. Not like we do geography. This is prophecy, and in a veiled form, in fact, as they were likely hiding it from the Spanish. But ancient Filipinos likely knew the meaning of this poem.
Well, if he can't prove it, then why should anyone care? Everything he is going to say will be conjecture and rest on the assumption that Lam-Ang is not just a singular man but represents the Philippines. This can be seen from a map from 1154 where the Philippines is labeled Lam-Ang.
This map is from 1151 AD. Wow, 400 years or so before the Spanish. Whoa! And what was the Philippines called on this map? Lam-Ang. Wow. I mean, that is incredible. So this is not an individual's name, folks. This is a nation. The life of Lam-Ang is the life of the Philippines. And let's review what happened and what happens prophetically to the Philippines. Let's be clear. We already proved the location in history, and this restores prophecy in which Messiah in Matthew 12:42 and Luke 11:30 tells us the Philippines will rise in the last days. Oh, this is going to go there too. Imagine that. Ezekiel 38 and Isaiah 60 verse 9 tell us the same, and these appear the basis of this prophetic story. For the ancient Filipino knew far more than we even realize.
Once again we have two islands, or in this case just one island, representing all 7,000 islands of the Philippine archipelago. It's just more mendacious nonsense from a man who has proved again and again he either cannot read maps or he willfully misinterprets them. He makes no mention of the island named Al Sabra, and he offers no proof that Lam-Ang is the Philippines or what that name means in Arabic. In the 11th video in his Enoch series he also discusses this map but fails to give the actual Arabic meaning of this word, instead focusing on what Lam-Ang means in Tagalog. That is completely disingenuous and does not take this map seriously. It was written in Arabic and not Tagalog. But Tim does not care. He does not care about accurate linguistics, nor does he care about truth. And why bother? He has already informed us he cannot prove anything he is going to say in this video. He might as well make it up as he goes. So, let's move on to the text of the poem itself. According to Timothy J. Schwab, the Bible tells us that in the end times the Philippines will rise again, specifically in the books of Ezekiel and Isaiah. Tim posits that those books appear to be the sources for this epic poem. Again, he offers no proof for this. Not a single shred of evidence is offered. How exactly does this narrative poem have its roots in ancient Hebrew prophecy? How would ancient Filipinos have access to the Bible? Tim does not say. He also does not tell us how this epic survived the burning of the books.
But this writing has been retained. However, the Jesuits likely did not even notice that this may very well be prophecy slipped right under their noses.
Yeah, sure. The Spanish were so sneaky and crafty but did not realize the life of Lam-Ang was actually a prophecy. Again, this is all ad hoc conjecture which can by no means be proven. Tim spends a great deal explaining that Lam-Ang represents the Philippines. Never mind the fact there was no unified Philippines until the arrival of the Spanish. Before that the islands were divided into various tribal groups. Even then the Spanish never conquered Mindanao. That was left for the Americans to do and is the reason why it remained such a problematic area. The inhabitants of the BARMM do not consider themselves Filipinos. It is simply not possible for Lam-Ang to represent the entire Philippine archipelago when these islands were never united. The end of the epic is where the alleged prophecy about Marcos comes in. Lam-Ang had a dream that he would be eaten by a shark while hunting for shells. Indeed, he was eaten and he died. His wife called the old diver Marcos, who brought up his bones, put them together, and God brought him back to life. Prophetically interpreted, Lam-Ang is the Philippines, the shark is the Spanish, and Marcos is a member of the Marcos family who will resurrect the Philippines. Marcos is even given a reward of gold by Lam-Ang. Keeping in line with Tim's interpretation, that would mean the Philippines gave Marcos all the gold he has as a reward for resurrecting the nation. But Tim says otherwise. He claims Marcos had billions in gold before he even became president because he was a lawyer working on the case of the Vatican returning gold to the Philippines.
This man Marcos is also given as payment so much gold, bulawan, it amounts to a pile taller than he. Now that's major wealth. And even the first Marcos did in fact receive a large amount of gold before he was ever president. For doing what? He was the lawyer for gold being returned from the Vatican to the Philippines, which, by the way, is a very, very monumental event. Because generally, the Vatican doesn't return gold.
When did this happen? Tim offers no proof. There are many stories about Marcos gold, but there are no confirmed stories about the Vatican returning gold to the Philippines, and Tim offers no proof that it ever happened. I wrote a review of Marcos Legacy Revisited, Raiders of the Lost Gold, which discusses all the stories about Marcos' alleged gold stash. It is a book worth reading. Again, Tim's theory rests on the interpretation of Lam-Ang as not a singular man but as the nation of the Philippines. So, let's go through the poem and see if such an interpretation is sustainable. It should first be noted that the translation Tim uses is rather bare bones and lacking in the detail of the translation compiled by Leopoldo Yabes. Compare these two stanzas near the end. See how much more detail there is in this version. Yabes' translation is a compilation of all known versions of this poem. If Tim had been using Yabes' translation, he would have seen that it was not Marcos or God who brought Lam-Ang back to life. It was his pet rooster, hen, and dog who used their magic to resurrect their master. The character of the diver Marcos does not appear only at the end of this poem. He also appears at the beginning as one who was called to assist in the birth of Lam-Ang. Marcos here is called the driver, but this is a misspelling. If Tim is correct that Lam-Ang represents the Philippines and Marcos represents a prophetic Marcos that will save the nation, then why is Marcos unable to help give birth to the Philippines? How does this make any sense? What prophetic role exactly Marcos plays in the beginning Tim does not say, but in order for his interpretation to be coherent he must be the same character and play the same role throughout the poem. But here we see he is inutile. And what about Alasad and Pasho the rich man? Of what prophetic significance are they? Tim does not say. Lam-Ang is born with the gift of speech and immediately speaks of being baptized, telling his mother to name him Lam-Ang. Right away we see the Catholic elements in this poem. If Lam-Ang represents the Philippines and wishes to be baptized, then that would mean the Philippines willingly accepted the Roman Catholic faith. This would destroy Tim's teaching that the Philippines was actually held captive by Roman Catholicism. The marriage of Lam-Ang's mother and father is referred to as a sacrament in the second stanza. Later on his marriage to Canoan will take place in a church and a mass will be said. Of what prophetic significance can that be except that Filipinos willingly accepted the mass? These elements do not necessarily prove the epic is not ancient but shows its syncretic nature. At only 9 months old, Lam-Ang goes looking for his father in the mountains where he went to fight the Igorots. Finding his father's skull on a pike, he challenges the Igorots and kills all of them except one with one fell swoop. He is able to do this through the aid of 3 magic stones he placed in his pocket. The footnote here tells us that these magic stones endowed Lam-Ang with magic powers from these particular birds and animals. Of what prophetic significance are these stones? How is the use of magic stones consistent with a prophecy from the Hebrew god? Tim does not say, and when he discusses this event he makes no mention of these magic stones which endowed Lam-Ang with the power of animals. The sole survivor of Lam-Ang's vengeance was shown no pity. What is this prophesying? That Filipinos are very cruel? Tim does not say, but the many news stories of people of all kinds being assassinated by unknown gunmen shows just how cruel and unforgiving Filipinos can be. Afterwards Lam-Ang bathes with a number of young maidens who wash his hair from all the dirt and blood of the Igorots. Instantly all the life in the river is killed. How is that exactly a prophecy of the Philippines? Is it because Filipinos litter and many of the waterways in this nation are polluted? And what do the women symbolize? Perhaps the licentiousness of Filipinos? Duterte said his only job now is to look at pretty women. And remember when he said as long as there are beautiful women there will always be rape? Lam-Ang next goes to seek the hand of Canoan with the help of his hairy dog and talking rooster who speaks for him. Tim pretty much covers everything from here on out. Lam-Ang is shown lots of gold and given tasks to perform which he does and is given the hand of Canoan in return. Then he dies and is resurrected. But how is any of this a prophecy of the Philippines? In what consistent way can it be shown that Lam-Ang represents the Philippines? And how exactly is this based on Ezekiel and Isaiah? To call this epic poem a prophecy is to say it was inspired by God. What proof is there that this poem was inspired by God the same way Isaiah was, who saw God face to face? There is only one part at the end about Lam-Ang being restored by Marcos, and Tim does not take into consideration that it is actually his pets who bring him back to life. The rest is a common fantasy. A young man endowed with superhuman strength avenges his father and wins the hand of the most beautiful woman in the land along with the help of enchanted objects, in this case a talking rooster and magic stones. This is typical hero's journey stuff. Let's not forget that before he even began, Tim admitted he cannot prove any of this. I agree wholeheartedly. He absolutely cannot prove it, not because it's prophecy which is open to interpretation, but because it's not a prophecy at all. The role of Lam-Ang as representing the Philippines does not fit, especially in the worldview Tim paints, because here we have Lam-Ang fully accepting Roman Catholicism. Not to mention there was no unified Philippines from Luzon to Mindanao until the Americans came. Thankfully not all of Tim's audience is buying his wares. The following response to a comment on this video is quite telling. Timothy J. Schwab of the God culture does not care about the truth. What a disingenuous piece of filth and rot. He has no right to spew that. We don't care about politics line when clearly he is teaching that all truth about Marcos, which can be found in news articles, books, and most important of all court documents, is a CIA fabrication. This video from the God culture is not unexpected, but it is troubling. Timothy J. Schwab remains fully entrenched in his ignorance. He repeats many times in this video, and with a loud voice, that he has never been disproven, despite I having done just that many times. The fact that he continues to spout off like a crybaby wailing, "No, you didn't disprove me, you illiterate blogger," at the top of his lungs rather than deal with the arguments I have presented is evidence of how bereft Tim is of both intelligence and honesty. No matter how loud he shouts, his books and videos will never be true. Everything he has to say about the Philippines is a lie, which makes him a liar par excellence. And now we have him condoning the evils of Ferdinand Marcos and his family because Marcos is allegedly prophesied as a savior in an ancient Filipino epic. What a crock.